Good morning and welcome to this week's reading. This week took a little bit of a different approach or process or evolved in a different way than I had expected. So, what I ended up calling this reading, or the kind of the premise is, so when your self-worth is written across your incomplete projects, what shift in perspective will help rewrite the judgmental story? This came about because I had originally thought that I was going to do a reading that was based on how to kind of triage projects and look at when we have a lot of things on the go, or if we have a lot of things that we've built up and never completed, how to go through them to see which ones are still kind of alive or still have that energy versus which are the ones that we're trying to complete and are no longer viable or sustainable or even relevant anymore in where we are in our lives. And as I said, while I was going through that, I ended up more starting to realize that for me, when I look at my huge growing pile of incomplete projects that I've started, there's a huge piece of self-judgment that comes out. There's a value judgment that I place on myself when I look at that, and it starts to create a negative story around who I am, what I'm worth, those kinds of things. And I started to realize that before you can start to work on triaging the projects that you have that are open and incomplete, it's important to look at which ones are having a bigger impact on the stories that we say about who we are and our values. So I have to say that, like, as I was going through this, I was quite surprised when I began to explore that I have all of these judgments about these incomplete projects. And, it does get to be really hard when we're living in this world that seems to put a person's value, especially employability and all that kind of stuff, on their ability to complete projects. And if we're unable to complete them, then it can have a detrimental impact on our self-worth. And I carry with me a lot of stories, judgment-based stories on my ability to complete things. And as I said, it's really interesting because I have things that might have been sitting in my space for 10 years and there's no longer an interest, there's no longer a desire to do them, but because they're incomplete, it still sits there and it still takes up space in my mind and impacts how I see myself and what I think about myself. And so seeing these judgments mirrored in the pile of incomplete projects, I realized that this is where this spread and this reading for this week is going to begin, because we need to learn how to create space that honors these incomplete projects and really understands that some projects are complete in the incompleteness. And that walking away from something has no impact on our value or our worth. And what I mean by that is that there are some projects that we are meant to start, and there's something we learn in the starting and the evolving of it without having to actually finish it. An example is I take a lot of online courses or I watch a lot of videos, and sometimes I'll never finish the video because maybe I only needed to listen to that 5 minutes of the beginning to see what it was that I needed. And the rest of it is irrelevant to what I need. And so being able to say, well, I watched that 5 minutes and I got that really good piece of information out of it, and I'm complete in that. That's more what this is kind of looking at, instead of saying, oh, I have all of these unfinished videos that I need to now go and watch. And it becomes an energy drag. And then we, like I said, we start to beat ourselves up. So, shifting our attention from what these incomplete projects mean about us to what they have taught us or what they have brought to us, that's how we're going to begin to engage with our to-do pile in a much different way. And like I said, I really do think that this is the place that a lot of us need to start, because it's less about completing the project and knowing what to do with these projects before we complete them, and really understanding right now, how are these incomplete projects impacting how we feel about ourselves. So the purpose That was a big, long intro to the purpose. The purpose is to gain clarity on where judgmental thoughts are distorting your self-value and pressuring you towards completion. So I'm going to shuffle that into our cards. And our question for this reading is, what will help shift your perspective on completion? And when I mean shift your perspective on completion, I'm saying that, like, what will help shift our perspective on completion away from self-judgment? Because that's really what we want to do. We want to shift, we want to separate who we are and what we're worth from the projects that we complete or have sitting incomplete. Right. It's pretty good. Now let's pick our cards. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here we go. All right. So our first card in this reading is, what belief about completion needs to be explored? And a lot of times our judgmental thoughts originate from the beliefs that we hold. And so when we're looking at us in regards to the situation, what are the beliefs about completion that we need to really be able to explore? And here we have, I think this is actually probably one of the most perfect cards that we can have around the beliefs and the judgments that we have around completion, especially the idea of walking away from something that's incomplete. Because with the Eight of Cups, there's this idea that we have to go off alone for, and this is just a neutral statement, right? Like that there are journeys that we need to go on our own. And so we need to explore the beliefs that we hold in regards to what does it mean when we have projects that are incomplete? And what does it mean to walk away on something that is complete, right? Like, so the Eight of Cups is saying this whole connection we have to completing projects is emotionally charged. And we need to be able to step away from the emotion, sometimes by stepping into the emotion. And because we know how we feel, because we know what we're going through, the Eight of Cups is coming up and saying this is a solitary process. It will do no good to go out and say to somebody, I have this whole big pile of incomplete projects here. What do you think about that? Because you're going to get their judgments, you're going to get their opinions. And so, what we need to be willing to do is we need to be willing to walk away from the idea that a project, complete, incomplete, in transit, however it is, impacts who we are as people, because there's always going to be something that's going to be shifting and moving and switching, which means that the projects that we're engaged in right now, the ones that we are motivated, the ones that we lean forward to, those are the projects that are looking for either the next step on them or the completion. And the other thing too that the Eight of Cups brings forward for us is this idea that sometimes walking away from something will give us what we need in order to come back and complete it later. And so right now, when we're looking about these beliefs that we have to explore, we need to be able to just kind of sit back and really feel into what's going on. When we think about the projects that we have, when we think about the things that we've committed to, what do we feel? This is less about what we're doing, but it's what do we feel when you think about a project that you've been trying to finish maybe for a couple months or a couple years. Where do you feel that inside of you, right? Like, do you feel it and the first thing your body does is it collapses and it gets tired? That's probably an indication that this is a project that needs to be put aside for a long time, or you need to be able to engage with it to be able to say, I'm done with this, right? But if it's something where you perk up and you're excited, then it's all about what you feel and what is bringing you forward. And it's time to start moving away from the beliefs, right? That's what she's walking away from, is the belief that this idea of completion dictates who I am. Next, we're going to look at what are the roots bringing up. So when we start to engage with beliefs, they will bring things up to the surface. And these are things we have to be willing to look at, right? The moment you step on the journey of self-exploration, you have to be open to accepting whatever comes up. So what are the roots bringing up for us? They're bringing up the star. And I think this is interesting because I'm reminded of that saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think that's what the star is bringing up, is that the roots of these beliefs that are making us feel so melancholic, so detached, so disconnected from everything, and that are causing us to have to take a step back and really get a clear, non-distorted image of what's going on, comes from the fact that when we start these projects, we have these hopes, we have these wishes, we have these desires to see them through to the end. And no one has ever taught us that the wanting to start something and the needing to complete something are two completely different things. Now, as somebody who studies like human design, one of the things that I find really interesting is that if you're familiar with it, there's a circuitry within the system, and each part of the circuits is broken up into channels that are broken up into gates. And so when you have two gates that come together, they make a channel. And it's very interesting that there's a channel that comprised, sorry, of the gate of beginning and the gate of ending. And so even in the way we're structured, right there, we're told that beginning is a process and ending is a process, and they are separate from each other. One can exist without the other. So you can be somebody that picks up all the incomplete projects and you finish them, and you could be somebody that begins the projects and leaves them incomplete. Or you could be somebody that begins and ends things. But the thing is not every project that we start is meant to be completed, and not every project we complete is meant to be something we have started. And so the star card comes up and it's saying this is what's coming up from the roots, is the understanding of the mechanisms between beginning, between ending, between incomplete, because some things will always remain incomplete because that's what they're meant to do. And like even if we look at pregnancies and stuff like that, right? Like not every pregnancy is meant to come to term. And it's very, very heartbreaking when a pregnancy is unable to come all the way to full term and have the birth of a healthy child. And there's grieving that needs to be done with that. And so I think that's something that we need to keep in mind as well, is that when we have projects that we can only take so far, there may be some grief around that, and that's okay. The thing is the grief is different from who we are. And too many times we attach that grief as a judgment on ourselves, as a value judgment on who we are and what we're capable of. And so it's very important, I find, with the star coming up as the major arcana, and the first one we've had in this reading so far, that what the roots are bringing up is what were you wishing for? And really looking and engaging with that, because what you might be needing to walk away from is the idea of the outcome and the attachment, and moving back more into the idea of the feelings that the wishes were surrounded in. Now we're going to look at how do these beliefs influence your motivation? And here we have the Ace of Swords. And it's interesting, right? Because now we've got, I just want to say that here we had the star, which according to the sign on here is Aquarius, connecting it to air, right? So that's air in earth, which means it could be drying. But now what's interesting is now we have the Ace of Swords, which is an air card. So two air cards, and it's moving down into the south. So when we're looking at how the beliefs influence the motivation, the Ace of Swords is saying, the beliefs have us rooted in a story that we say, and the story is very detrimental to our passions and our motivations. And having the Ace of Swords comes in and says, what we need to do is we need to start saying a new story. We need to let the beliefs go. We need to stop equating completion, incomplete with valuable, worthless, all of those kinds of things, reliable, irresponsible, all of those kinds of ways that we judge ourselves based on what we're capable of doing and completing. And the ace is coming in saying it's time to start putting fresh air into these fires of this passion. It's time to really start connecting with what is inside of us and to really say to ourselves, this is a project that was only meant to go so far. And it has nothing to do with you. It's the life of the project. And so the more we can start to really start to focus on the stories that we're saying and catching ourselves when we're falling into the old ones and saying, we're going to shift this. We're going to speak differently to ourselves. We're going to speak encouragingly to ourselves. And we're going to remind ourselves that these beliefs that we held are working in a disservice to us, and that it's time for us to really start to shift and cut them out so that we can make room for more clearly thinking and seeing and understanding what all of those old beliefs are doing in the system. Then we're going to move to what wounds do these beliefs continue to inflict? And so, of course, if we're really burning ourselves out and if we're really beating ourselves up, this is going to just keep going and going. And so here we have the 10 of Cups. And interesting that we went from starting right here at the 10 of Cups, and the 10 of Cups is sitting, they're in the spread, they're sitting side by side. And so that means that the 10 of Cups being a water card, also sitting in the western part of the spread, which is water, is saying that, like what's really, really doing this to us, what it's really, really cutting to the heart of is every time that we beat ourselves up, every time that we connect our value and who we are to the projects we've completed and the projects we have incomplete, what we're doing is we're tearing away at our self-worth, at our foundation, and our ability to really love ourselves, right? So the 10 of Cups in this situation, looking at what we're asking about is saying, the more that you hold this belief, the less you're going to love yourself. And unless you take the advice of the Ace of Swords and you start to really feel that desire, that motivation, that fire within your belly, unless you start filling it with new, empowering, clear stories that disconnect you from the projects and what they are doing, you're going to continue to slide backwards. And you have the potential by healing this to really, really boost your self-love and to really be able to find that place where you feel the most safe, the most home, the most comfortable, right? The 10 of Cups for me is the home of the heart. And if the home of the heart is being beaten up by the words of the brain, right? Then the home of the heart doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel warm. It doesn't feel inviting. And so that's really what we're looking to do. And I think that connects beautifully to the star because the star is all about intentions, right? It's all about what is it that we want? What is it that we are hoping for? And how do we want to feel? And if all of the wounds are attacking that core fundamental, how do you want to feel? How do you want to be loved? How do you want to love? Then it makes it really, really difficult to actually achieve that in life because every time we think we're going to get there, these stories are going to say, nope, nope. You need to go finish those projects before you can have this, right? It's being held up. The way the belief does is the belief holds this up as a prize, as a reward, as something you have to work for or earn for. But this is what we are fundamentally born into. And so we need to stop looking at it as, oh, I only get that if, and say, no, this is mine and this is what I have. And these other things are irrelevant. And in the end, we're going to be asking what new story is ready to emerge. And so interesting here. Now we've got air on air. So these cards are going to be augmented. And we have the Nine of Swords. And it you would look at it and say, wow, the Nine of Swords in a new story that I want to tell. I want to talk about anxiety. I want to talk about fear. I want to talk about like all these worries and this never ending nightmare of a situation that I'm in. And what it is when you're looking at how it fits into the reading, you're looking at the Nine of Swords and saying, okay, so what's the new story that's ready to emerge? The new story that's ready to emerge is how walking away and getting clarity, reconnecting with what was really at the heart of all of your desires for all the projects that you've started, telling yourself new stories, and reconnecting with your inner self-love and kindness and compassion, you were able to move out of the story of anxiety. You were able to move away from this constant degrading story that beats you up, that puts you as a victim, and able to move out of that into an empowered story, into a clear story, into a story that supports growth, that supports your ability to be very well aware of what's going on and detached from everything being a comment or a criticism or a judgment around you as a person. Because that's what this does is, oh, heaven forbid somebody knows that I have a pile of 15 different projects that I'm working on and none of them have moved in 6 months, right? Heaven forbid my boss should walk in and see that I haven't done, this was me as a teacher, that I haven't completed my report cards and they're due in like 10 minutes. Or heaven forbid somebody should ask me a question about what it is I'm supposed to be finishing up and I don't know because I haven't even started it, right? That's what this whole process is about, is to be able to say, yeah, you know what, come in and ask me, and I will tell you, I have projects that are on the go, but you know what, I have other things that are going on as well. And so I'm learning how to understand where these projects fit, what's going on. So it's really, really important for us to remember that the things that we do are not who we be. Um, I just like the way that sounds. So now taking all this and going back to our question about what will help shift your perspective on completion and the way that we hold these judgments around ourselves and our relationship to completion. Looking at the cards that we have, we'll start with the star because it's the only major arcana card that came up. And it's kind of also asking to say, maybe it's time to start wishing for something different. And I have learned that when it comes to wishing for things, it's learning how to wish for the energy of what it is that I want, as opposed to wishing for the exact thing I want. And let me put that as an example. So instead of wishing for a new car, right? It's wishing for, I want something in my life that's going to give me the feeling of safety, that's going to allow me to feel confident that I'm going to be able to get to the places that I need to get, that I'm going to be able to hold enough things when I go grocery shopping, for instance, that it's going to hold all my groceries. Um, you know, and whatever comes through is going to be coming through so that I can look out my window at whatever the vehicle is, even if it's a horse and buggy, and look at it and go, that's what I wanted, right? And by doing that, that's what we're going to really start to shift as far as our values. And so when we're looking at the projects, when we look at the projects and we remember when I wished for writing this novel, when that was my intention and I wanted to start writing this novel, what was it I was feeling? Because that's what I need to have back. And a lot of times that's for some projects, a lot of times we've just disconnected from that energy. And if it's gone for good, then that just means that we did what we did with it and we can let it go. Next, we're going to look at the fact that we have two cup cards. We started with a cup, and then we had cup in the water position of West. And so this is also an emotional piece. It's not about doing anything. It's not about it's not about doing anything in the sense of the wand cards, which is all our energy and our motivation. And it's not about creating things in the physical sense because there's no pentacles here. This is an emotional state. This is taking time to really understand where the disconnect in our emotions comes. Why looking at these projects might leave us completely depleted, but not energetically in the sense of, I have no energy, but just emotionally drained in the sense of there's really some deep, deep grief that's going on here that needs to be cleared, that we need to be able to be with. And that comes from being alone and going through the process to being able to really reconnect and love ourselves and be happy with who we are in the situation we find ourselves in. And then the other thing, of course, because we're talking about beliefs and judgmental perspectives and opinions, it comes down to communication, right? It comes down to saying better, well, I wouldn't say better, different stories about ourselves by disconnecting the stories that we say about ourselves and about the projects we're working on so that we can be able to no longer be trapped in these nightmares, to no longer allow the stress and the worry and the anxiety about what's that person going to say about me? Oh my God, I'm such a horrible person. To being able to say, you know what, I understand what that was like. And now I'm going to channel it into a different way because I know it has nothing to do with me as a person. And that's the biggest thing I think that this reading is bringing forward is that our ability to start a project, our ability to end a project, our ability to have anything in between of all of that has nothing to do with who we are as people. We are still valuable. We are still worthy. We are still lovable. Even if all we do is go around and start projects, or if all we do is go around and end projects, or if we go around and do absolutely nothing at all, right? That I think is the message. So before we start to jump into looking at how to triage projects, how to deal with projects that will never be completed, how to deal with projects we've outgrown, we need to really sit there and look at what is the judgment we're placing on ourselves when we're looking at these kinds of topics. So, having said that, I hope you did enjoy this reading. If there's anything that you got out of it, that makes my heart sing. So, you can like the video to kind of let me know. And if you want weekly readings, subscribe to the channel because they come out every Sunday. And right now, we're exploring a wide variety of topics. And so, with that, I hope you have a beautiful, wonderful day, and I will see you again next week or somewhere around the webs. In the meantime, take care.